Welcome to the Road to Accountable AI. I'm Kevin Werbach, Professor of Legal Studies and Business Ethics at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. For decades, I've studied emerging technologies from broadband to blockchain. Today, artificial intelligence promises to transform our world. But AI won't reach its potential without accountability, mechanisms to ensure it's deployed in responsible, safe, and trustworthy ways. On this podcast, I speak with the experts leading the charge for accountable AI. My guest on this episode is Dominique Shelton Leipzig, a partner and the head of the AdTech privacy and data management team and the global data innovation team at the law firm Mayer Brown. Lawyers will have an important role in advising companies about how to implement accountable AI programs, and Dominique is absolutely one of the leaders in this area. As you'll hear, she has a new book on the topic. She's also, among other things, a member of the International Association for Privacy Professionals AI Governance Center Advisory Board, the founder of the Digital Trust Summit, which she'll talk about in our conversation, and co-founder of NxtWork, a nonprofit dedicated to diversifying the C-suite and the boardroom. An incredibly accomplished lawyer who understands the leading edge issues that businesses face is a valuable resource for any organization. It was a pleasure talking with her about what companies can do to effectively implement AI governance practices and the important developments in AI regulation. Dominique Shelton Leipzig, thank you so much for joining us on the Road to Accountable AI.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Tell us first about your background. How did you get involved in technology law?
Well, it's been a really interesting road. It would seem that it was all organized, but actually it's just a series of sort of a confluence of different synergies. So I've been practicing in the area of data and privacy, cyber ever since 1998. After studying at Brown University, I studied international relations and French civilization, so nothing to do with technology then. And but I was really interested in world affairs and policy. So that's why after Brown, I went over to Georgetown University Law Center. And my favorite course I remember was privacy and American law. This predates the internet and everything. This was back in 1990. So fast forward 8 years later, I started working for a firm that no longer exists, but a small boutique that did a lot of work for Yahoo and PeopleSoft and some of the other technology companies. It was a San Francisco-based firm. I was the fifth lawyer in the LA office. So from there, I just really stuck with the issues dealing with, these tech companies way back in 1998 and 99. Their privacy issues articulated around ad tech and then later data breach in 2012. So from there, just continued with it. At this point in time, I've trained over 50,000 professionals on AI, privacy, and cyber. I spent really most of my time looking at legal trends in order to be able to forecast for companies what's coming down the pike and how to be data leaders, not just sort of skimming by with the minimum that they can do in the law, but really excelling. So my book Trust is Trust, Responsible AI, Innovation, Privacy, and Data Leadership. It's my fourth book. And I really just try to focus there on forecasting those trends again. One other thing I'll just mention in terms of how things can come full circle. As I told you, I was really interested in international affairs. That's why I was an international relations major at Brown University. And how privacy and cyber and now AI have become global issues is really exciting over the past 5 years. So I did an op-ed for the Financial Times in 2020 to deal with the stalemate of crisis of data going back and forth between Europe and the US, which jeopardized about 7.1 trillion in commerce that was going on at the time. So I wrote an op-ed that I wanted to use in the Financial Times to influence policy, and it was really rewarding to see President Biden adopt my recommendations for an executive order to deal with the redress issues post-Schrems. So that's really what took me here today.
Fantastic. No, a lot to cover. Let me back up in what you said. You mentioned that privacy has been around for a long time and cybersecurity issues have been around for a long time. How does that connect with AI and the issues that companies are facing today?
Well, yeah, so looking at the trustworthy AI legal frameworks, and there are 97 countries and 6 continents right now that have draft legislation or regulatory frameworks that were issued by regulators and not laws. But all of them that I've seen, I had an opportunity to canvass this in connection with the research for the book and also advice I give to clients. All of them call for, in addition to risk ranking the AI, for high risk AI, they do call for continuous testing, monitoring, and auditing of AI in some key areas. And one of those, well, two of those areas include privacy and cyber, but the other five, bias, IP, accuracy, health and safety are some of those. So that's how it fits in. It's going to be in Europe, we'll go first as far as the final laws, but in Europe, it'll be a requirement to continuously test, monitor, and audit high risk AI in the areas of privacy and cyber, along with 5 other areas.
You talk about in the book that every company now is a data company, regardless of what industry they're in. What exactly does that mean?
It means that data, although it doesn't appear on a balance sheet, unless you're doing M&A and it's buried in an intangible asset, for the most part, data does not appear on a balance sheet. But as we've seen, Kevin, it was so critical during the pandemic. Those companies that did not have a data strategy and didn't have a good digital game plan to pivot to are just not with us right now. So that is just how critical data is to every single company. And when you think about how AI is going to fuel the insights that can be gained from data, it's really going to be the bedrock of the future of successful companies.
So would you say every company is now an AI company?
Uh, you know, every company is probably an AI company already right now, between whether they're using AI directly or they're relying on vendors that are using AI. But this is we did almost close to 1 trillion in licensing deals last year on AI. So these projects are being deployed pilot phase in enterprise offerings. So this is going on all around us, all around the world.
How do you think about the topic of what I call accountable AI, but trustworthy AI, responsible AI, AI governance? There are all these variants on the theme. Um, I mean, how would you define what that category means?
So uh, prior to the legislative and regulatory frameworks, it was really kind of bespoke, and it depends upon what company you're in and what frameworks that you're following. The NIST risk management framework, the White House AI Bill of Rights, we were talking about uh, one of the professors that helped draft that, a computer science large language model expert. So there are a lot of different codes and best practices floating around. But now, where the legislation and the regulatory frameworks have stepped in, and we've seen just an explosion of those starting 3 years ago, but really picking up steam with the release of ChatGPT 4 and last February, and sort of the explosion of this technology in the uh, regular parlance of popular culture. There's also been a rush to regulate, let issue legislation and guidance. And so it means very specific things for the legislators and regulators right now.
So it's an interesting point. Is it a good thing that now it's no longer just companies figuring out on their own what it means to be responsible, but now we've got all these specific regulatory and compliance requirements?
I think it is a good thing because it actually gives companies an opportunity to benchmark against a standard rather than sort of be a little bit at sea and lost about how to exercise governance. The legislative frameworks and the regulatory guidance is actually very didactic, and it lays out what they all use the term that they're there to codify trustworthy AI. That's what the EU AI Act says right in the opening, and that's what we're seeing in, like I said, the 70 other countries that have similar frameworks on the table. What they're looking for is first a risk ranking of the AI. And they're very clear about what constitutes the 3 buckets: prohibited AI, so there's 17 areas where uh, governments around the world just don't want private companies involved in those activities. Things like continuously monitoring people in public, or social scoring, using, Kevin, what you might post on LinkedIn or social as a basis for making a decision about whether you should be a company's customer or not. There's no governance around that activity because regulators around the world don't want private companies engaged in that. The other kind of risk ranking category, which I call the green light, it's prohibited. Maybe think of that as a stoplight. Tap the brakes, don't go there. The green light is low risk AI, and that's things like chatbots for non sensitive use cases. Going to a website to buy some jeans and you're getting a suggestion about what to purchase from the chatbot. There's very little governance there because they consider it low risk. And frankly, the view is most people have been interacting with an AI in that context. Think of Siri or your mapping app where it gives it voice to tell you which way to turn on your in directions to get to a location. Those were mostly powered by predictive AI. So the view is, well, if a chatbot's powered by generative AI, the relative risk of that is low. So all they're asking there, these uh, regulatory legal frameworks, all they're asking there is that there be disclosure to end users that they're interacting with an AI. The need of the governance, and we'll talk about that later, is in high risk. And there's 141 examples. Every company ought to know what those are, and then the governance steps that the regulators think uh, are important.
So this all sounds great for lawyers. You're a lawyer. I'm a lawyer. There's a lot of requirements now on companies, but when you talk with boards, which I know you do a lot, uh, how do you convince them that this is not just something where they need to check a box because there's a legal requirement they're going to have to meet, but maybe it's not even applicable to them yet?
Yeah.
Maybe these laws are still on the drawing board. How do you convince them to really invest both the resources and the time to be serious about this kind of governance process?
Well, I talk about this in the book, and you're right. When I'm talking to boards and to CEOs about these concepts, I frame it in terms of unlocking innovation and success with their brand, success with the services that they're offering with AI. Let's take it. Let me give you some examples. I try to give storytelling examples to help crystallize the importance of this. So let's just even talk about low risk AI. Just about a month ago, a logistics company in the UK, very similar to our packaging delivery companies that deliver packages overnight and so forth. Big company in the UK had a chatbot that they were using to interact with customers, letting them know when their packages would arrive and etc. Uh, Suddenly, the CEO wakes up to a viral thread going on X, formerly Twitter, about the company and the chatbot, where a customer jumped onto X and posted the chatbot cursing out the customer and criticizing the company as being the worst logistic company in the world, etc. Right? So, company disabled the chatbot. Actually, they didn't need to disable the chatbot. They just needed to insert guardrails that would have let the company know that the chatbot was cursing out customers. So it's the type of thing that is very avoidable. It doesn't need to happen at scale, and you can protect your brand in the process. The point is that uh, governance, under putting the things in place that the legal frameworks require. For example, continuous testing, monitoring, and auditing on things like accuracy, um, uh, you know, health and safety, privacy, cyber. What that means is code needs to be entered into the application, the AI tool itself, with the guardrails of what is acceptable to the company. So, in terms of accuracy, just think about rewind the story I just told you and what its accuracy meant. That when talking to customers, it has to start with a please and a thank you, and it's going to be inaccurate in their environment, in any language the company does business, to curse at the customers, for example. So rather than have tens, thousands of people experiencing this that are your customer base. Instead, the first time that the chatbot cursed at the first customer, the company could be alerted, a human and the governance team could be alerted, look at the logging data and metadata associated with that chatbot, see when it started to drift into cursing activity, and just fix the model, right? So it's nothing about waiting till 2 years until the law becomes final to protect your brand. You can jump in right away and do that, and that's why it makes sense to do it.
It's a great example. Is there any way that from the outside, I can tell if a company is really serious about their responsible AI practices? That might be as a customer, it might be a potential business partner that I'm trying to decide whether to have a relationship with this company. Is there any way to look and be able to, or what questions should one ask to make that kind of assessment?
Yeah. So the questions to ask are, first of all, are you risk ranking the AI? Where we stand there? Uh, do you know if you're engaged in any high risk AI? For high risk AI, are you uh, making sure there's high quality data, accurate data going in and accurate data coming out? Uh, that's a key issue. In terms of accuracy, are there IP rights, privacy rights to use the data that is being used to train the model? And then with respect to uh, deployment, and you're going to interact and engage a vendor, for example, the question is there a mechanism for continuously testing, monitoring, and auditing this AI? Why? Because in the generative AI context, the large language model experts, the folks at Wharton that you work with, and other data scientists tell you that state of the technology is that models move. We want them to move because they're being informed by the whole wide internet that is being added to, we generate 2.5 quintillion bytes, 18 zeros behind it of data per day. All of that roiling new information is getting into the model and making it smarter and having the ability to have greater insights. But that means that what you tested it on today, it's going to move, won't be the same necessarily tomorrow or 30 days from now or 60 days from now. So the only way for the company to know that its values are going to remain in the model like it started, taking an example again that I mentioned when the chatbot was first working with cursing out customers, but later over time uh, developed that language. The only way the company's going to know about that is if there are guardrails that it can be basically like a sensor on your window at home. When the alarm goes off, that's the only way you're going to know that a burglar has entered. Similarly, you're not going to know that the model's drifting unless there's guardrail to let the company know.
As you mentioned, the title of your new book is Trust. Uh, Actually, something I've written about too, and in a different context or related context having to do with blockchain technology is a new form of trust. But I want to ask you about AI. So why is it that you think trust is an important value or an important term to use, and how companies should think about AI?
Yeah, so that is just really plucked directly from the 97 regulatory and draft legislative frameworks in 97 countries, 6 continents that do talk about trustworthy AI. And they say we're codifying trustworthy AI. So, uh, given that that's the legal standard, I think it's the sooner we uh, start adopting that language, the better, because that's what the standard is. But more importantly, I think what I found interesting in my research and what has been so helpful is to see that this time the legislation actually was built with the large language model experts' advice in mind. So, legislators around the world sat with large language model experts and data scientists around the world and said, look, what if we were dealing with AI, not about, a chatbot that curses out customers, which is embarrassing, but again, not not really life threatening. But what about a situation where we have AI in our power grid or our hospital systems or our water supply, and we have to deal with drift, and we need to get an AI model back on track, where we really don't have room for error? What would you need data scientists to be able to correct a model quickly? And what they said was just what I told you, continuous testing, monitoring, and auditing so that there is a baseline, uh, technical logging data and metadata so that when the model drifts, the data scientists have something to look at and be able to track when did the model start to move to diagnose the issue and correct the model and get it back on track as soon as possible. So that's how we can trust that when AI enters our hospital systems, financial networks, our power grid, and our electrical supply, and also, let alone national security, that it's trustworthy.
Is it more important though to trust the AI systems or to trust the organizations that are deploying them?
Both, right? This is the organizations, uh, and let's just talk about companies because that's what I know best, and I work with. They're in the business to, we talk about brand and goodwill that does appear on a balance sheet, and you know, a big bedrock of brand is trust, right? If customers do not trust a company, we've seen this over and over again. I was reading something in Forbes recently that companies that are trusted are 400% more successful. Uh, the companies that have broken the 3 trillion market cap club right now, just a few of them, they're, they put trust front and center in their branding, in their communications with uh, customers. Trust is right there. Trust in privacy, cyber, AI. Uh, People are entrusting their data with a company, and they want to know that the company takes that responsibility seriously. And the only way to show that is to actually be aware of the legal requirements and follow them.
So, uh, clearly you're right. Every company wants to be trusted, but it's not costless, right? I'm sure you've dealt with companies and boards who say, sure, we of course we want to be responsible. We don't want the example you gave with the chatbot or anything else, but it's going to slow us down if we have to go through all of these compliance processes and talk to our lawyers. And the lawyers may say, don't implement this system that we think will have some real business benefits. And maybe our competitors are not going to be as careful. They're going to implement it. How do you convince companies or how do you help them draw those lines most effectively?
Yeah. So I talk about this in the book. Rather than, I think the old mantra for Web 1.0 and 2.0 would move fast and break things. What I've been encouraging is move fast with trust. There's not a reason in the world that the steps that I mentioned are just 6 of them. High quality data, uh, accurate data going in, accurate data going out is the first step. Second step, continuous testing, monitoring, and auditing. Third, technical documentation that should be maintained from the continuous testing. That just happens real time in the background. And then a human that if the model starts to drift, a human can come in, look at the logging data and metadata and correct the model. And then if you can't get the model corrected, a fail safe to kill that AI use case. That's 6 steps. That it doesn't take time. It just takes attention. It doesn't require a huge upheaval. Requires more and what is more costly is the $1.4 trillion, for example, that it cost our global economy in 2022 and 2023 when data privacy was missed, right? Same issues. 161 countries have data protection laws. And unfortunately, it wasn't something that was talked about in the boardroom very often. Cyber, yes. Cyber, another issue, talked a lot about, but last year it cost our global economy 6.1 trillion in losses. So if you take the losses in data privacy, 1.4 trillion, plus the losses in the cost of cyber, 6.1 trillion, we're talking at close to 8 trillion, which would, if that were GDP, if that were one country, would be the third largest GDP in the world behind the US and China. So we've got to get savvy economically here and keep that money to grow our grow our economies, grow our businesses, grow our customer base by paying attention to this very straightforward issue. We need to not be intimidated because it's tech.
You mentioned the European AI Act and some of the AI legislation going on. There's this notion, kind of conventional wisdom I hear a lot, that the US is still the Wild West, that in the US we have this attitude that companies should self-regulate in general with tech, but with AI specifically. Do you think that's right?
Yes and no. So, first of all, in terms of federal legislation, I think you're right. The US is going to be behind Europe. Europe has already reached a political agreement, and they're on the verge of adopting the final language for the final EU AI Act. And that will go into effect 24 months after it's adopted formally, which should be happening, I think, around May is the estimate. So May 2026, we're probably looking at it at where enforcement will come in. But we've got a lot going on here in the US. The executive order, President Biden has issued an executive order on AI. Prior to that, executive order is sitting on top of and refers to the White House AI Bill of Rights, as well as the NIST AI risk management framework. So there's a lot of good guidance that's very synergistic with what we're seeing with the EU AI Act. There's these 6 steps that I've talked to you about exist in every place I just mentioned in the US. Um, Also, we do have some laws in sectoral areas in the US already on the books. So in New York, for example, there's an AI law as it relates to the use of AI for employment and HR purposes and hiring purposes. We also have laws in Illinois and et cetera, related to biometrics that cover AI. And then we have data protection laws in California, Colorado, Connecticut that give consumers the right to opt out of automated decision making. So we have things here, um, more of a patchwork than what we're seeing in Europe. But frankly, all of our significant companies are doing business in Europe, so they're going to be highly influenced by what happens in Europe.
Isn't there some benefit of having a more distributed approach like the US, where laws can be passed more specifically focused on issues as opposed to having one huge comprehensive code like they have in Europe?
Well, as I said, the 6 steps that the Europeans have put forward, which are mirror what is in the technical companion to the AI Bill of Rights that came out of the White House, those are just good business, practical things. There's just no reason for a company to be completely unaware if their AI is denigrating the customers, for example. There's, especially when there's tools in this day and age, 2024, to be able to identify that. It's just all the way better for the brand. But get into things like healthcare and drug development, where it's really key and critical that companies be aware if, say, for example, the AI is recommending the wrong medicine to people, which has occurred. That's just going to hurt the brand and hurt business down the road. So I don't look at it as tethering to the waiting till the law goes into effect and holding out to the last second when there are brand issues right on the table right now with the use of this technology. And you want to use the technology to stay competitive, of course. I mean, AI has been used already. A month after ChatGPT 4 was released, some doctors gave all their medical data lake to an AI tool, and it was able to identify an early treatment for liver cancer. It's amazing. LA, right here at Cedar Sinai Hospital, they're using AI right now, generative AI, to be able to have early identification of pancreatic cancer. So this is incredible innovation. That's just in the healthcare context, but I mean, everywhere, financial, education, et cetera. So we've got to use this technology, but we have to understand its limitations. And one big one is that it drifts. So what could be a great thing can be a terrible outcome for really no reason other than just not having the guardrails necessary to manage the technology. It so happens it's in the law as well, but it's just good business sense.
How much, though, will those kinds of obligations fall on the companies that are not the ones building the technology? So if you're Microsoft or OpenAI or Google, you have that technical expertise. You probably have a lot of resources internally going to, making the AI responsible, doing that documentation, doing the testing, and so forth. But if you're a manufacturing company or an agricultural company, one of these companies, to your point before, that they're all data companies, that is using this technology that they're implementing built somewhere else, how are they going to have the requisite expertise either to comply with the law or to just take those good business steps you're talking about?
Yeah, so I'm excited. We're going to talk about this at the Digital Trust Summit at Brown. The obligations fall on both the providers of large language models or generative AI, uh, if they have a high risk use case. And I want to put a big if there. And we'll talk, put a pin and I'll come back to that. And also fall on those that license those models for their own purposes. So both the licensor, which is the tech company, and the licensee, the business that is, licensing it, maybe training the models with their own proprietary data and creating their own applications. So the obligations in terms of the trustworthy legal AI framework fall on both. In terms of the ability to incorporate these things into their businesses that are licensing the models, to incorporate these 6 steps into their practices, there are all kinds of vendors that can help with developing guardrails to put into the AI tool. Uh, Dropping some code into the tool is not particularly expensive exercise. It's just knowing that you need to drop the code in to be able to do the testing, and then developing the guardrails. And there are vendors that do this. And we're going to talk about who they are. And if anybody's listening to this podcast and wants to get those recommendations, there are a lot of them that are now interoperable with all the major tech companies' tech stack. And it's very easy to get these guardrails in place. So it's so great that the small and mid-sized companies don't have to go in blind just because they're small and mid-sized.
Yeah, just picking up on what you said, what's the best place or some good places you would recommend for someone to go to that just wants to be aware of either what the requirements are or what are the best kinds of steps they can take?
Well, so a couple places. I have a free chapter of the book on my website. It's just my name, DominiqueSheltonLeipzig.com. And you can download that and see those 6 steps that I mentioned. Also in the podcast notes, I'm happy to share an article about, trustworthy AI frameworks that was done by MIT based on a talk that I gave. Uh, it's detailed also in the book, really a detail, 400 pages though, so it's a lot to read. So if you're not interested in reading all that, the MIT article is about 3 pages long and goes through all the backup.
Terrific. Thank you. So one more question. One development that we should look to in the next, say, 1 to 3 years, either something you think is coming with AI generally in terms of the technology, the business, or something in terms of the legal and responsibility aspects of AI. There's one thing that we should be on the lookout for that you think is going to happen in the near future. What would it be?
I think we're probably 2 or 3 years away from getting large language models coming out that where the drift issue is taken care of, where they don't move as much. So probably 2 to 3 years out from that, from what I understand from the large language model experts, the computer and data science teams working on this, but particularly in the area of AI used to apply to the genomic stream and find early identifications for generative diseases like ALS or pancreatic cancer. A lot of advanced work is going on by Nobel laureates and et cetera to see if there's a way to titrate on that and basically control the movement. So you don't have to worry so much about the guardrail. They'll be built into the models themselves. We're probably about 2, 3 years out from that, but I'm excited about that opportunity.
Wonderful. Dominique Shelton Leipzig, thank you so much for joining me on the road to accountable AI.
Thank you for having me, Kevin.
This has been The Road to Accountable AI. If you like what you're hearing, please give us a good review and check out my Substack for more insights on AI accountability. Thank you for listening.